In this assignment, we're going to look at how to make a drawing that's a combination of a section drawing, a line drawing, and a render all in one. And we're going to start by turning off everything other than the solids in our model, which I have done here. Okay, so then the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to use the command that we looked at in the last assignment called clipping plane to cut a section through our object. Now remember, if you've got an object that's kind of hard to snap a clipping plane to in a controlled direction, just make some other object and use it as a reference. I like to make a box to do that. That's really easy to grab to. And then if I use clipping plane, I like to go 3-point, 1, 2, 3. Then you can see that I've got a really easy to control clipping plane that is oriented to this object in a way that makes sense. Now, as you can see, what I've done is I've got this clipping plane that it's facing the wrong direction, which is not a problem with the clipping plane selected. I can just go up to my properties and then I can flip the direction, and now I'm looking at this object in a way that actually makes sense for this assignment. And now comes the part where you have to choose where to cut this section. Now generally you want to choose it in the most interesting place that shows the maximum amount of detail. Since this object is mostly symmetric and pretty much everything is happening right in the middle, then the middle of this thing seems like a no-brainer to me. So what I could try to do is to eyeball it, or I could just go into this top view here, or whatever view is easiest for you to work in. It would also be just fine in the right one for me. What I can do is I can go into the top view. I've got this clipping plane selected. If I don't have it selected, I can select it and I can just move it as I would anything else by grabbing, maybe the end and then just snapping it right to the middle of this thing. You'll notice that in this view, I've got a section view of my thing, and in this view I don't. I don't have one in this one, and I don't have one in this one either. And that's because when I have this clipping plane selected, generally, by default, it only works in the 3D view unless you tell it to work in other views. So what I can do then is if I go over to my top view, I can activate that clipping plane in the top view. And if I go to the right view and I want to see it there, I can activate it there too, or I can deactivate it, whatever makes it easiest for you to do what you need to do. Okay, so let's go back to that 3D view, which I've called use this one, and I'll explain where that name came from in just a second. And now what I need to do is I need to find just the right angle. So I've got my clipping plane in the right spot, which you'll remember is right in the middle of this object. And I'm going to go and I'm going to find a really good angle that kind of makes it look really good and kind of shows all these details and kind of gives me a good sense of the 3D space of this object. That's looking pretty good to me. I think that'll do. Okay, I don't need this thing anymore, so I can hide it or I can delete it. And then actually, let's go there a little bit more of an angle. I think that's okay. So once I have a view that I like, I can go over here and I can save this view so I can recall it later. Now, I can do it using the shortcut that I've made over here, but if you don't have that shortcut, then let's go to View, and then let's go to Set View, and let's go to Named Views. And now we can name this view so we can recall it later. So you can see here I've done this as a test run before, and I named this, use this one. You can create a new one over here, and you can either give it whatever name you want. I'll just say use this one. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, cool. So now what this lets us do is whenever I move this object, I can always recall that same view using that command. Now, one thing that I will advise you and actually require of this assignment is that when you are making this, make sure you can check this by clicking just somewhere off in the gray space, activating the Properties tab, because that's going to give you the properties of the view itself, that this projection thing is set to parallel and not perspective, right? Because in the perspective view, you can see this is just like when we learned how to draw a 1-point perspective by hand. There's a vanishing point down here, and this object gets smaller as it gets further away from our perspective. We don't want that because that is a less accurate portrayal of the true geometries of this object. Again, if we were making a rendering of a space and we wanted to get a sense of what this thing looked like from the human's eye view, then we would use this perspective command. But we don't want that. We want a true measured drawing, something that really reflects the geometry of the object. So let's use parallel and let's make this a true parallel projection drawing. Okay, cool. So, and make sure that you get that command selected before you save that view, because it will recall that same option whenever you recall the view. So now we've got our view selected, what we can do is we can use another new command called make 2D to generate a line drawing of this view. So to do that, let's go ahead and go back to my Layers tab. We don't need to have the layers tab open to do it, but I want to show you something when we do. So we're going to select everything that we're going to want to include in this drawing, and we're going to use the command called make 2D, which is make 2D. So this options box is going to come up, and you're going to be presented with a few options. The default option for projection is view, just leave it like that. Object properties, you can just go ahead and for now, let's just leave this as input objects. Select the clipping plane intersections if it isn't selected already, and select group output if it isn't selected already as well. And I'll explain what that means in just a minute. So if I say apply, okay, you can see it's made this sort of drawing, which looks a little bit weird right now, but that's because when it makes this drawing, it dumps it on the top plane, right? So if we look at it from the top view, it's going to look very normal. If we look at it from this view, well, you can kind of start to see when I rotate the view that it's just stuck it all on the top plane and we're just seeing it from a weird angle, okay? So if we go over to top view, we can see we've got this cool line drawing over here, and you may have also noticed that it's made us some new layers in our layers panel. So it's produced this drawing and it's stuck it on this make 2D layer over here, which we can turn on and off like any other layer. It's also got some sub layers that are based on the options that we selected. So the curves are just the lines that it drew in the background. The clipping plane intersections are the section lines that it calculated from where our clipping plane cut it. Now, sometimes these aren't 1000% accurate. You'll notice that some of these things, when I turn them off, like that was a clipping plane intersection too, and it's still shown on just the curves layer. For the purposes of this assignment, it does not matter at all. So let's just leave it like that. This will do just fine. Okay, so that's going to give us pretty much everything that we need to make the line drawing and the section drawing. So let's get back to the part of the assignment where we make the render. So we're going to do that line drawing and section drawing stuff in Illustrator like we did before. And we need to combine it with this render that we're about to make, and we'll also do that in Illustrator. So let's go back to that view. And again, we've moved this around, but that's no problem at all because I can go back to my view and go to my set view and go to use this one, and I'll get my view back right there. Let's go ahead and hide that make 2D stuff because we don't need it for this next part. And then let's go ahead and let's change our view to something that is better at showing shadows. So let's go over here and let's go to Arctic. So Arctic is going to give us a sort of marshmallow render of our object. And that's nice because the shadows sort of show us the curvature that we don't quite get from a line drawing. And we're going to take a few extra steps here before we export this view to make sure that it plays nicely with our line work and looks as good as it possibly can. So one thing that we know is we don't need all of these lines showing us where the section intersections are because we already have that in our line drawing. So to make our lives easier and to avoid redundant line work that's hard to edit, let's just turn that stuff off. So we can change that by going over here to our display properties. If that's not shown, again, you can right click over here and you can activate that display properties option, which is right up here, or you can also access it by going to view and going to display options over here. Okay, so if I open that options tab and I turn off show edges, then that's going to get rid of that. And now you can see I've just got that kind of cut face there. Now, the other thing that I want to do here is I don't want this shadow on the ground plane because when I export this view, I don't want it to be cropped down there. So I'm going to just get rid of that whole ground plane, and I just want this object floating in space. To get rid of that, I can go to Edit Arctic Settings, and then I can just go over to ground plane settings and just say turn it off. Okay, now it's floating in space. Great. One more thing. I'm going to go ahead and hide this clipping plane so I can select it and say hide, because I don't want that showing up in my drawing either. I just want this. Now, Rhino has its own built-in rendering capabilities, and they're pretty good, but we don't need that for this assignment. What we're going to do instead is we're going to use what's basically a fancy screenshot, and we're going to get that by going to View, Capture, to File, and then let's go ahead and let's go to the viewport resolution. We don't want that. We want custom, and let's just kind of just scale this up to like 3, maybe 4. Let's do 4 because this could be a big board, right? Okay, let's just do that. And let's go ahead and let's select it with a transparent background and say, okay, nice. And we're going to save this. And when we do, make sure you're saving it as a PNG or something with a transparent background, just use the PNG for this. That's all you need for this assignment. Because what that's going to do is it's going to let us change this background to any other color that we want in Illustrator. And if you find that white makes it hard to see the object, which it shouldn't, because you're going to have all this black and white line work, or that's black line work around it, or if you just want to add some more style to it, this makes it easier to do that. Okay, so let's just name this render exclamation point. I mean, name it whatever you want, but that's what I'm going to call it for this demo. And let's go ahead and drop it on the desktop. Again, put it somewhere better, name it something better. This is just to get this demo done. Okay, let's go ahead and save it. So this is going to create that kind of super high-res screenshot, and we're going to be able to combine this with the line work in Illustrator. And because we've upped the resolution by a factor of 4, we can stretch this image to 4 times what it is on my screen right now, and it won't pixelate. So that's something to think about, is as you're planning out how big this thing needs to be. That can help you decide how much it needs to be multiplied. Okay, so our render is ready. Now let's go ahead and export that line work, and let's combine them in Illustrator. So let's go back to our layers. Let's just go back to shaded. That should be just fine. And then let's go back to the top view. Let's turn our Make 2D stuff back on. And now we can select it. And let's go ahead and export selected. And let's just say that this is the line work. I'm just going to pop it on the desktop for the moment. And I'm going to say OK for that one. And then let's go over to Illustrator. Let's open it up. What was that called? Line work on the desktop. Sure. Hey, there it is. Let's do a Command 0 real quick, make it fit. We got our oversized artboard, so let's go ahead and change that to, let's just start with 36, 24, or whatever is in the assignment. And I wanted that the other way. Let's go ahead and flip this. Okay, cool. All right, let's pop you right in the middle. Hold down Shift while I stretch so that it maintains constraints proportions. Remember, Photoshop is the only one where you don't have to do that. Let's put it right there in the middle for now. Okay, cool. Now what I can do is let's go ahead and let's make sure that that's on its own layer. So what it did was, remember that or we may not have talked about this before. This is a good time to talk about it. So you'll see there's 2 layers in Illustrator here, right? We've got the Make 2Ds over here. So when you export from Rhino to Illustrator, what it's going to do is it's going to move all those layers to kind of a top layer, right? And it's going to export them in layers to Illustrator, which is handy. Okay, cool. So we've got the line work on their own layers. That's fine for now. Now let's go ahead and let's add a new layer. And let's just call this the render. And this is going to be down there below all that stuff. Let's go ahead and place. Hey, Pink. Pink is my cat. Let's pop that down there. And you can see I've got this really nice image here with no background. It's going to be super easy to work with. And I'm going to underlay that under all this line work here. So let's go ahead and let's zoom out a little bit. And remember to hold Shift while you move this thing around so that you can constrain the proportions. Pink, I'm in the middle of something. All right, let me pause this for a second because my cat's walking on my keyboard. All right, there you go, girl. Go on the porch. Okay, now we can make this fit. There are probably smarter ways, more sophisticated workflows to get this stuff to fit in Illustrator. Wish I knew what they were. But I just remembered the way that they work. Let's go over here and let's go ahead and lock at least one of these edges in the right spot. And we're going to scale this using, what is this? It's this button over here, I think, right? Scale? Sure. Then we're going to have this as our reference point. And let's go ahead and grab that edge too. And let's drag that up to there. That's almost right. Hold on a second. There we go. Okay, cool. All right, wish I had known that in architecture school. All right, so that's done. All right, now let's go ahead and let's just lock that layer. Or we just turn it off for now, that's fine. And then let's get on with the business of making some poche. So we're going to do that here just like we did in the last assignment, where we're going to just kind of select everything. And let's use the shape builder tool. And for this assignment, remember, I'm just going to combine everything that's been cut through into one continuous region of poche. So keep in mind that you need to be real careful about keeping the stuff that's in the background out of the mix. So that was all one piece. This was all just part of that same nub. Let's get that guy. Yeah, there we go. All right. Say you're all one piece. You're all one piece. You're all one piece. All right. And then, all right, cool. That's a little bit of an oversimplification of this thing, but I think we're showing the cut planes just about right. Or the cut section. Okay, yeah, that looks good to me. Cool. Now let's go ahead and just select that shape that we just made, and let's make the fill black. Uh-oh, we screwed something else up there. All right, let's check that out real quick. We forgot something. Control Z. Okay, let's try it again. Okay, let's take a gander, and oh, how'd I miss that? Okay, let's see here. You guys, and shape builder, and this is all one thing. And okay, let's try this again. Select our shape, and let's go to a black fill. That's more like it. Okay, I'd say that thing is poche'd. Control 0. And now what we can do is, one, that already looks pretty good, but if we wanted to underlay our rendering underneath it, then we can turn that back on, and you can see we've got our poche'd section overlaid over our render, which looks really nice. And by doing it in this way, of course, we can go completely crazy with it. So if we wanted this fill to be, hot pink instead, we could do that. We could draw a shape behind it. So let's go ahead and make a new layer, drop it down to the bottom, throw a rectangle on it, and let's just snap that to the edges. And then we could change that color of the rectangle to, whatever, bright yellow. Or hot pink, and then change the fill to some kind of nutty. Let's see, let's go to patterns, basic graphics, textures. Make that sprinkles instead. I don't know. I mean, you can go crazy with this, but don't for this assignment. Let's do something restrained and tasteful. So let's do either like a simple black poche or white poche with a black outline over probably a white or a black background. Not to try to limit anyone's creativity here, but let's just make sure we have the basics down first before we go nuts. So, we've got white over black or black over white, also looks good. Flip these, go back here to that shape, black. There we go. So, again, lots of good ways to do this. I think I might have just accidentally added a black line to the outside of this. We want that to have probably no line work around it if it's black poche. There we go. That looks better. Okay, cool. And that's how you do this assignment, and that's how you can make all sorts of different cool section graphics and overlay them over a render, which is great for a section perspective later on, or all sorts of other drawings that are communicative and expressive. The end.